Hey there guys, Manic Mercurian here, back once again, and in this video I thought it would be fun to go through some frequently asked questions, all astrology related of course. So let's begin. First question is, what is a rising sign or ascendant? So the rising sign or ascendant, they're two terms for the same thing, also called a first house cusp. It's basically a representation of where the eastern horizon was when you were born. So which constellation was over the eastern horizon when you were born? And there's a lot of different interpretations of this. You know, it's the mask you wear, or it's your first impression, or it's your appearance. You know, we get a lot of these like scattered definitions in astrology. But let's just put all that aside for a minute and just think about the eastern horizon itself and what that is and how that, how symbolic it is and how important it is. So what's significant about the eastern horizon? Well, it's where the sky is conceived. It's where things begin. It's where the sun rises in the morning. It's where the whole day starts. And not only the sun rises there from the underworld up into the sky, the planets and the moon also rise there. And so this is the symbolism of conception, of beginnings, of not just beginnings, it is beginnings, it's initiation, but it's also a portal. It's a portal between what we can't see and what we can see. It's about emerging from, being obscured into being part of the same world. And your ascendant will change very quickly. So even if you're born a few minutes different, your ascendant could change a few degrees. It's literally how you were birthed into this world, how you start things. And so a lot of that will be your first impression. Not only how you start things, but how you start for other people. So how do you begin in other people's worlds when you appear into their world? It's almost like when the sun rises, and so it does rule beginnings, how you begin things, how you approach things, a lot of your appearance as well, how you approach things, but it's also how you approach life. And so there's a lot of like soulful, not just physical appearances and mannerisms, although the rising sign or ascendant does definitely have a lot to do with those types of more mundane parts of our astrology, but it's also your approach to life, and a lot of it's your life purpose. What did you come here to do? What are your goals? What are your missions? Things like that. So hopefully that gives you an idea of a rising sign or ascendant. Next question is, what does it mean when a planet is in a sign, i.e. moon in Aries? Okay, so basically what that means is that we say the planet is in Aries, the moon is in Aries, for example, when that planet is over that part of the sky. So basically what I'm getting at is the idea that these zodiac signs aren't actually the constellations. You can, it's basically the backdrop of the sky. And so you can sort of think of it as the stars, as the constellations, but really it's just sectors of the sky. That's what signs really are. It's 12 sectors of the sky. It's 12 directions, sort of like north, west, south, and east, except in space, and there's 12 of them. Okay, so they're almost like regions of the sky, and so when the moon is in Aries, it's going over that part of the sky, that 12th of the sky, that piece of the pie there. It's in that area, and so it takes on symbolisms and mannerisms and themes of that sign that it's in. So the sign is almost like, the ancients would call them houses, and we have houses in modern astrology as well. It means a little bit of something different, but they are houses or zones or regions. They are environments that the planets occupy. And so you can think of each sign as being a sort of stage, and each planet being a character. The planets are like characters in this epic drama, and the signs are setting the background. And so the moon might act one way normally. So we know the moon. The moon has almost a character of its own. It's emotional, it's sensual, it's quiet, it's subtle, it's sensitive, it's passionate, it's emotional. But how does the moon act when it's in Aries? that might be very different than when it's in another sign. And you can experience that not only in a person, maybe in yourself, if you're born with, this is the example we're using, so Moon in Aries. So you take that on, and that's what you are all the time. That's what your moon sign, that part of you represented by the moon, is in Aries. So that's what you are all the time. That's your identity. But we might also experience that transit. So when the moon transits over the Aries, we all experience that to some degree, and it's different for all of us depending on our own astrology. But yeah, that's basically what it means when a planet is in that sign, if that makes sense. So hopefully I described that well enough. It just means that planet is in that part of space, and it's sort of playing around and immersing itself in the themes represented by that sign. Next question. I am born on a cusp. What does this mean? Alright, so I'm assuming you're talking about your sun sign. So you're born with your sun close to a cusp. So a cusp, in case you don't know, is just the line, the border between one sign and another. And this question is actually very controversial in astrology. Some astrologers will say there's no such thing as cusps. So you're either in one sign or another, which is true. You are always in one sign or another. A planet is either at 0 degrees of one sign or it's at 29 degrees of another sign. There's no gray area. However, getting into degrees, getting into sections of a sign, not every point within a sign is the same. There are different pieces or regions within each sign. It depends a lot on which side of the cusp you're on. If you have a planet, and all planets can be by a cusp, not just the sun, but let's say your sun sign, let's say your sun is at the very end of a sign, it's going to be very intense, and endings are intense. It's almost like a death in a way, if you want to think about it like that, because that's an ending. You're preparing to leave one world and enter another. The sun is preparing to leave one sign and enter another. And so at the very last degree of a sign, a lot happens. There's a sort of echo effect where it's almost like the test at the end of the class that you need to take before you graduate, where you're quizzed on all the things that occurred during that sign, during that transit. And so different things will come up. It's going to be intense, though. There's an intensity there that other people, other energies might lack. There's this element of intensity, of importance, of crucial, of a crisis. It's almost like an impending crisis where it's very philosophical, and you're going over all these themes and all of these mini stories and tangents, but there's a sense of urgency to it. And so you might be more intense, you might be more prone to react, but also philosophical, and there's just so much going on there. You can almost think of it kind of like Pisces as well, because Pisces is the very end. It's preparing. We experience these patterns in many different ways. So at the end of a life, or at the end of a trip around the sun, in the Pisces season, or at the end of each sign, there are similar themes, and it's the part of consciousness that is preparing to end a chapter, and that can be very difficult for us humans in the way our consciousness is. But that's what a cusp is at the end of a sign. At the beginning of a sign, it's totally different, because you're beginning, the new sign is being birthed, and so toward the end of a sign, that sign's energies are waning, they're getting weaker. So the end of Sagittarius is getting more faint, less fiery, more intense, but sort of less fiery, and it's hinting at the dawning of a new sign about to come. And then on the first day of Capricorn, boom, it's Capricorn. It's very intense. Suddenly there's a lot of Capricorn energy. So if you're born at the very beginning of a sign, you're going to be very, very much like that sign. At least that planet is. Now, if it's your sun sign, you might have other planets like Mercury or Venus in either sign, on either side of the cusp, and so that could kind of confuse things a little bit. But if we're just talking about the sun, if it's at the end of a sign, it's going to be waning of that energy and incorporating a lot of different themes. If it's at the beginning of a sign, it's going to be very focused, it's going to be very singular. It's going to be like, we are going 100% in this direction, in the Capricorn direction, or whatever sign it's in, of Libra or what have you. Next is, what is a house? So let's think about signs first, because that's more maybe intuitive to us. So what zodiac signs are dividing the sky into 12 slices, right? And we can sort of use the constellations to see, because it's like the backdrop. Okay, we're dividing the backdrop, we're dividing outer space into 12. Now the houses do sort of the same thing, but in a different way. They also divide the sky into 12, but the houses are not so much based on outer space or the constellations. They're based on the horizons. And so the first house cusp will always be the eastern horizon. But each house, kind of like how each sign is a different part of the sky, has different themes, each house is also a different part of the sky. It's just a different way of dividing it. And each house also has different themes. And they behave a lot like signs. It's just a different way of dividing the sky. So they're different. It's a different way of looking at the environments which the planets and sun and moon occupy and affect how they behave. Next question, why are interpretations by various astrologers so different for the same forecast period? That's a great question. I love that because they are very different. Sometimes they'll be similar, but a lot of times they'll be very different. So something that I love about astrology is that it's different for everyone, and myself included. So, when I give my observations, these are just my observations. They're affected by my own astrology. And so each astrologer, they have their own astrology as well. There's no truly such thing as being objective, because everything is, the way we perceive everything is affected by ourselves. What is in is out, what is out is in, as above so below. And so depending on one's own astrology, they're going to perceive astrology differently. That's one main reason for it. Another reason is that there's many different ways of going about astrology, and I've already kind of touched on this a little bit, but there's many different systems, different house systems. You can do sidereal astrology or tropical astrology, Western or Eastern. There's different mechanisms that you can use in astrology. There's slightly different interpretations of the planets and the signs themselves. So nothing is set in stone. And you might, I'm sure if you're listening to this, you're probably into astrology, but I could just hear somebody going, oh, well, astrology, there's nothing set in stone. It's all just wishy-washy. Oh, and okay, sure, that might be a little bit true. Nothing is really regulated very much in astrology. But science is like that too. Nothing's set in stone. Scientists are always disagreeing and having different observations and maybe different sets of evidence which might be contradictory. And so astrology is like that too. And so, I think that's beautiful. And I think you can listen to different interpretations and go, okay, maybe that's what so-and-so is saying. That's their truth. That's what they're seeing. And just go listen to other people as well, and then take it all in and see what resonates with you. Maybe, some of it will really resonate from one person, and other, someone else will have something that is really important as well. So hopefully, I know this is such a rambling video, but hopefully that answers that. Next question. My friend and I are the same sun sign. Why are we so different? Well, okay. And this question isn't here, but this ties to a question that I've seen before, which is, why don't I relate to my sun sign? And these two questions, although they seem very different, actually have similar answers. So, okay, just for simplicity. So my friend and I are the same sun sign. Why are we so different? Well, because you and your friend are not just your sun sign. There aren't just 12 different personalities. Each personality is unique, and each snapshot of the sky is unique, sort of, and thus you will be too. And so there's more in your chart, there's more in your astrology going on than just your sun sign. So it's the same answer. There's a lot more going on than just the sun sign. It's just really not that simple. There's, astrology is complex. Psychology is complex, and life is complex, and astrology is sort of a representation of psychology and of life. And so, of course, astrology is going to be complex as well. It's based on simple patterns, but it is complicated. And with that, we have no more questions, and I think that's a good place to leave off. So hopefully you found that interesting. If you have any suggestions whatsoever, please leave a comment or message me at manic.mercurian@gmail.com. And with that, I thank you for watching and bid you adieu. Have a good night.